Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And with me today, so this is super cool. We've got a world traveler, been on TV, author, and a 3-time Guinness Book of World Record holder. And this is all about voice, singing, and music. So get super excited today. You're going to meet Richard. And oh my gosh, Richard, I have you here. And then Richard Fink. There we go. Sorry, I keep calling you Richard and I forgot your last name. So Richard they're a homeschooling family, and he has been teaching his music program for years and years. But he's created a program now that is for homeschoolers because they started homeschooling in their own family, and they were like, "Hey, let's bring this program into the homeschool world." Just in case anybody's listening is in the Florida area, Richard and his program, as well as our program and myself, we're all going to be at the FPEA convention in late May. So if you happen to be there, you'll be able to see Richard's program. And he said he's going to have another contest. I'll let him tell you about what his contest is. If you happen to be in Orlando, come visit us and come hang out. Make sure you say hey to Richard. Say, hey, Richard's on the podcast. So, all right, you ready? Here we go. #1 best-selling author in vocal education. And he's labeled as, are you ready? The world's leading online vocal coach. That was from the Wall Street Journal. So then right? That's one of those things when you say, oh, if you read it on the internet, it must be true. No, not this time. This is in the Wall Street Journal. So it actually has got some serious merit to it, which is great. So he's worked with singers in over 100 countries around the world, including multi-platinum best-selling artists, professional actors, political leaders, and Broadway stars. Super cool, right? And as a vocalist, with that 3-time Guinness World Record holder, he's also an award-winning singer, and he's participated he was Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar, and it was Jean Valjean in Les Miserables. So I'm just going to say Les Mis because I probably said that wrong. But you're also going to see from 2016 and 17, he was traveling in Australia and was with the Voice of Dance. Voice of Dance Life Unite. I have to look at my notes. And then in Suncane Skale, which was televised throughout Europe. And he told me he was in Montenegro where they were doing some of the filming. So just super cool. He's been teaching Masterclasses around the US and at various universities and in Australia. So here we go. Are you ready? His crowning achievement was becoming the first and only person in US history to be awarded a full utility patent on vocal training technique with the 7 dimensions of singing. So it's amazing, Richard. What an amazing background. People are going to, we want to make sure you have all of his links to how to get to his program. But let's start with this because some of you are already like, okay, well, what is this? So the first thing, Richard, is welcome to the podcast. And how do people contact you? And we're going to say that again at the end too.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me, of course. So you can go to Throga.com. That's THROGA.com. And the course is the Vocal Gym for Homeschoolers. That's what we're focused on. And it uses that patented technique called the 7 dimensions of singing, which we might get into a little bit today too.
That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, so let's kind of look at your story and what happened, because it's pretty amazing how you kind of came through and how you developed the talent you had in the midst of what was going on in your life. So, you say that you actually were, you're a drummer by trade, right? And then you decided to join the choir. But you joined the choir because you thought that's where the girls were and you wanted to meet girls, right? Which is actually kind of funny. I was sharing with Richard before we started to record that I did the same thing, except I didn't join the choir. That would have been way smarter. You did the cooler thing. Instead, I joined home ec, right? So I learned how to cook and sew, and you were like hanging out singing. So sounds way more fun. But as a teenager, you actually started dealing with a hearing impairment, started going deaf, and being deaf in one ear definitely would create some challenges for any vocalist, right? But you've taken that and turned it into something that has now become something that has brought a lot of joy, not just for you, but for people around the world that you've got a chance to work with. So you sang a song when you were in chorus and you brought a girl to tears. Yeah, that's it
right there. That's a pivotal moment.
When I made whatever we made, spaghetti and meatballs, right, back in 8th grade, that didn't work so well for me. So either way, the tears they had was usually the tears of that. It was the tears of the smoke where I was burning something and it was like getting their eyes, right, made them cry a little. So kind of funny. No. But usually, you discovered that power of the voice. And, for anybody that's watched Jesus Christ Superstar, you've got to have in music business, people, singers, they call it pipes, right? But the range that you have to be able to sing those vocal parts in Jesus Christ Superstar is just
Oh yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah. And then you shared something with me about one of your mentors. Tell us about Ted Neely and your relationship with him. Because Ted Neely, if you don't know, was the person that did the movie Jesus Christ Superstar when the movie came out. And now it's the 50th year anniversary of that.
This year.
That's amazing. Well, tell us about your relationship with Ted Neely, because that's really cool.
Yeah. So, okay. So let me try to lead to that here for a second.
Absolutely.
So, because there's kind of like a moment that leads up to that, if it makes sense. So you're right. I started with drums first. I was about 8 years old and kind of discovered the drums. And I remember the first song I learned was Let It Be from the Beatles, just kind of figuring out that coordination, everything. And that was just so much fun. And I just fell in love with music at that point. I had already experienced a little bit of hearing loss. I had tubes in my ears since I was a little kid, and just some issues, but I could still hear. And then as I aged, not with the help of playing drums and making really poor decisions by not wearing earplugs like I should have, it made my hearing even worse, to the point where my right ear was an 80% comprehensive loss and my left ear was a 60% loss. So it was pretty significant. And I don't know, I was probably around 12 or 13 and started making those choices like, I should probably learn sign language. I should probably kind of prepare for maybe something that seemed inevitable. I mean, that's what the doctor says. You're going to be deaf by the time you're 30 at this rate, something along those lines. So I started wearing earplugs, sometimes, but I was in rock bands. I was playing, stuff like Metallica and just like really loud, heavy drums, because that's what was fun for me. And I was in bands, things like that. And my senior year of high school, there was a girl that I wanted to spend time with. I didn't have any classes with her, but she was in choir I had a free time. I was like, okay, I got to join choir. I like music. This will be fun, whatever. Never really sang much. When I did sing at home, it was probably the only instrument my parents didn't encourage. I mean, if you can imagine, they would rather hear me play as hard and as loud as I could in the back room than hear me sing. What does that say about my voice? Right? But I didn't care. That's not why I joined choir, right? So then I was just trying to figure out like, oh man, this is where I got placed in choir. She's way over there. So I got to be able to sing tenor, because if I sing tenor, the higher notes, that gets me closer to where she was. So it's just this path of strategy. So I'm like working on my high notes and trying to figure out all of that. And I just fell in love with the process, but I was also super frustrated because I couldn't get the high notes, but I didn't understand why I couldn't, but other people could, right? Or I'd run out of breath. I didn't know why. So some of the questions that I had for myself were kind of basic, like, how do you read music? I knew rhythm, but I didn't know notes up and down. So there's a big learning curve, a lot of questions. I just kind of fell in love with that process. But I was still honed in on, okay, I need to connect to this girl, right? So I thought, well, what better way than to write a song? Just completely ridiculous, ambitious, quest I put myself on. So I wrote a song. And I sang it to her one day at school. And I looked up after playing it on the piano and singing. I looked up and she was just bawling. It was in that moment I knew singing was for me. And I wasn't even good at it. It's like, if you can bring someone to tears through the connection of self-expression in your voice, not even being on pitch, and you could do that, it was just like this overwhelming feeling. I quit the band. I sold my drums. I bought a PA. I just doubled down on this completely new adventure. And it was right around that time that Ted Neely, I'm going to tie it all in. I didn't forget. Yeah. Ted Neely was on tour. I don't know. It's probably the 25th anniversary, whatever it was. He was doing a tour starring, reprising his role as Jesus in a national touring up in Rochester, New York, where I grew up. And I stood backstage, all nervous to meet him, because I grew up watching that movie 1,000 times and loved his voice and these crazy ranges. And now I was like really interested in the voice. So I met him after the show and we just clicked. And I asked questions. Everyone else was like, sign this, da da da. I'm like, how do you get, how do you get that note? How do you get that note? How do you get this note? And just drilling him with questions, and he just took it in. And so he had me stay after he talked to everybody else. He stayed with me in the theater until they kicked us out, giving me vocal techniques and vocal exercises. And in the next 3 years, whenever he came in town, I was even on tour with him for a little bit, and he took me under his wing and taught me how to sing. And a lot of my technique that I use today was based on some of the principles that he applied for that. So it's just an amazing sequence of events that led me to work with him and discover the voice, while not really having the intuition to know how to do it myself.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. Did you notice? So today, so tell us about your hearing right now, because, go back from 80% in one ear, 60% loss in another ear. How is it today for you?
So right now I have a larger than normal spectrum in my left ear. So it's considered 112%. I guess you want to throw a number on it. And my right ear is 0. So Just the way the brain works is amazing, because it can literally rewrite itself. So that what's called neuroplasticity, where the neurons can connect different paths. So essentially my brain gave up on trying to use and process sound in my right ear, which is my left audio cortex, and rerouted all of its attention to the other side. And so now I have perfect hearing on one side and nothing on the other, which means I can hear perfectly, but I don't have a stereo field. So it might be a little bit quieter than what you might have, because you have 2 ears versus 1, but I don't know where sound is coming from. So when I wear earbuds, I'm listening to music. If they've got the guitar panned to one side, then I don't know what's happening on the other side. So I then have to flip my headphones or listen to it in mono to process the whole thing. So it creates some inconveniences. Conversations are really tough at the dinner table. If you're sitting on the right side of me, I have no idea what's going on in your world over here.
Wow. Okay. Well, it just reminds me, like, I'm kind of date myself, right? But I grew up in the 70s, right? Got my first car in I think it was 1978, right? And and so everything about the car back in those days was you had to have the cool car. You had to go for the muscle car, right? But it wasn't the car, it was your stereo system that made a difference. But back in those days, it was that stereophonic kind of sound where it was like you would hear something on the right channel and something on the left. And, and it was like, and if you weren't, you could tell when it was changing from one to the other, right? So
yes,
that's interesting. I think music's done better with making it where it's not so much like that anymore. But there's still some things out there that they still go
for
through.
Sure. They're just not as dramatic in the choices. I was listening to Iron Butterfly the other day. And Inagata DeVita. Do you remember that too?
Inagata DeVita. I remember that song.
So they've got like all of the keyboard over here, all the guitar over here. And it's just like, I'm listening to it, like, is there any guitar in this song? Like I had to flip it. So yeah, they definitely use, spatial mixing now that is, I can thoroughly enjoy the mixes that are taking place now, even though I'm missing some aspects of it. But when I'm working with the singer, it kind of doesn't matter. I think of it this way. If you cover one eye, you've only got one eye to process vision, which means you don't have any depth perception, right? So you can't see if a ball's coming. You can see a ball getting larger coming at you, but the coordination of grabbing it isn't there. If you think of that with sound, if someone's singing for me, I can hear their entire spectrum. I can hear their tone and everything else. But the cool thing is they're never out of focus. I'm not as distracted. I'm not distracted by the depth perception. I can hear the frequencies fully. So in some ways, it's become kind of a tool that I use in my everyday teaching, and probably what led me to digging so deep into understanding how the voice works and breaking it down into 7 dimensions and studying the anatomy. So I'm able to understand and communicate what's happening with others. So I think every path, of course, is unique. And all the challenges that we have generate opportunity that makes your path so amazing. And so I'm just embracing it as it comes.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you embraced it. Well, not only did you embrace it, but you're a 3-time Guinness Book of World Record holder, right? In music. I know people probably heard me say that in your intro, and they're like, okay, well, what is that? What did you do? And you were sharing with me before. I mean, that's pretty impressive what you did. So, and then how is it a 3-time Guinness Book of World Records? And tell us about that.
Right. So I basically, my current record right now is for the longest continuous vocal note, which means it has to be a single pitch, it can't waver, on a single breath, is 2 minutes and 1 second. So I literally just went, just like one steady pitch, and you just hold it out as steady as you can for as long as you can. And that came from, I stumbled into somebody else had the record of like 57 seconds. And I was like, wait a minute, I warm up with 1 minute. So it was just kind of like, because I've always just challenged myself. How long can I hold it out? How high can I go? Just like, I'm always challenging myself. So I already knew I could beat it. And then you kind of find the Guinness rules, and there's like all these aspects to it that make it way more difficult. So I had to train for it. So I broke that initially. Then that was taken from me. So someone beat my record by like 2 seconds. I'm like, no, I got to get it back. So then I had to go even longer to like really make sure I sealed the deal. So I technically had that one twice. And I also have the longest Guinness World Record for the longest scream. And I did that one in Ireland. A company, Captain Morgan, the rum company, found out about my first record, flew me out to Dublin, and they were doing a contest. They wanted to see who could do the longest R for Pirate Day.
Right.
And it's just got these crazy adventures. So I literally just went, R, like I had to scream it for as long as I could. So that set another record. And now I'm working towards beating that, because I want to take that one to the next level as well.
Oh my gosh, that's great. So, just to do anything for 2 minutes and, over 2 minutes, right? I've been doing some things where I got introduced to breath work, right? And it was like part of the breath work is you do this technique of the breath work, and then you hold your breath, right? So I've been able to hold my breath for over 2 minutes. But if I just try to hold my breath or just do anything where I'm being continuous, a continuous breath for more than a minute, if I don't go through some kind of very intense, get ready warm up before that, that's not going to happen, right? And at that point in time, after a minute, I'm like, my eyes start to, everything starts to go a little dark, right? But do you have like a process you go through to prepare to do something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, you're capable of going way past that. It just comes down to kind of demystifying the why and how. Like if you study, here's how my lungs actually work. Here's how my brain regulates carbon dioxide. Here's this. You start asking these questions and start to, go down that rabbit hole. You'll discover amazing things you are physically capable of. And you have a background in playing trumpet. So I know it's like you probably have a good sense of, managing your air, or at least a good awareness of how to spend your air efficiently, right?
Right.
But that's the other side of your question, because if you go with how long can you hold your breath, that's how long can you keep your brain from pressing the alarm from too much carbon dioxide in your blood levels. But to spend your breath means how can you regulate the out breath, which is different than your body's need to draw more oxygen in. So there's kind of two aspects to it.
Yeah.
So for my breath holds, I would go up to 6 to 7 minutes. So just to be able to hold my breath.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow.
following the same process like the free divers do,
right.
Dude, those guys can go like 15, 20, I think the world record is 21 minutes underwater in a single.
Wow.
It's amazing what the body can do. So I studied that just so I can kind of conquer that aspect to it. And then for single notes, just to be able to hold a steady pitch on the out breath, I would do different exercises at the piano and just try to build the strength of my voice and to manage the muscles around my lungs so I could spend the air fluidly.
Wow.
So it's something literally anybody can train for.
Right. But, you pointed to something that is really, really huge, right? And it is, you use the word train. You have to train for, just anything you want to be really great at. There's work to do, right?
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I think people have got the sense of who you are, which is really, really awesome, right? Let's talk about your course. So
yeah,
when you're looking at the 7 dimensions of singing, you actually say that, there's really answering every question is really, really important. And oftentimes I think we see a course, and especially if it's something we have like an interest in, like I'm interested in, I want to learn about singing, right? So I'm going to just look at the parts that are important to me, and I may not look at everything that's there, right? So because I have this idea of what I want to accomplish. In a math course, no one really knows what they want to accomplish. They just know they're taking math, so they just do them all anyway, right? But you're looking at the importance of answering all the questions inside of singing, and that has to interrupt with people's sometimes their goal of why they're there. So why is it for you? Why is it important that they answer every question?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. One is that I think there's this illusion that singing has really only one specific agenda, which is to be on pitch, right? So if the entire goal is, did I get the right note? Did I hit that note? You're satisfying a very narrow field of what singing is, but that tends to be what the initial goal is, because our society says, oh, you're a good singer if you're on key, just in its most generic sense, right?
Right.
But the thing is that there's amazing demonstrations in almost every genre of someone singing off key and still winning a Grammy, or still making a career out of it, or still just being able to express themselves and love it. So there has to be more than just being on pitch, right? I struggled with pitch just dramatically, and range and breath control and all those things. So the idea of the 7 dimensions came from me trying to break down and understand why I couldn't do certain things. Because I'd go to one teacher. Look, this is before YouTube. This is before, I think we had dial-up AOL, maybe at the time, maybe. So I didn't have the resources that everybody has today. So I would go to local teachers and, go to the library and grab this book and everything else. And the problem I found was the level of inconsistency. They would say, oh, to get this note, do this. And this teacher would say, no, do this. And this technique would say, no, do this. And it drove me nuts. So what it led me to was studying anatomy books, because anatomy books are by and large consistent. This muscle is called this. It does this. It's attached to this. And when I started studying the anatomy, then I could go, oh, that's what the teacher meant when they said, hold out a ribbon as it twirls to get vibrato. I mean, the abstract concepts just didn't work for me. I had a literal mind. So that's what led to that. So, and actually, if I were to just give a little visual here real quick, the 7 dimensions, I broke it down into flexibility, breathing, intonation, range, tone, articulation, strength. And this is essentially a profile that someone could take within the course, or just you could take it for free on the website. And over time, as you answer questions, you start to learn your voice more, it evolves, and you start to see a skilled increase in pitch, or the strength of your voice, or articulation, by targeting different muscle groups. So that's really what the 7 dimensions are about. It's just breaking down, hey, I can work on this and this. So when you do a vocal exercise, it's not just a exercise that hopefully will help you. It's, I'm doing this exercise to target articulation, because people keep telling me they can't understand the words when I say. So I'm going to focus on that. So it just takes training. That's why I call it the vocal gym, training the coordination of the muscles to develop, which means anyone who can speak can learn to sing. Everybody can improve if they understand which exercise to do and how to do it. And that's really what the premise is.
Oh, I love it. That's so great. I think that when you're looking at it from all those different dimensions, right? And you've broken them down into the 7 dimensions, it's great because it gives you that complete approach. And and then you're what you came there initially for. Not only has that been taken care of, but it's been enhanced because of everything else that you have there. So it's interesting too, because when you're going through each of the dimensions, there's the how and why to that, right? And oftentimes, and I think it's something people like about our math courses, because we're actually saying, well, this is why this happens, or this is how this equation came about, right? And as opposed to, here's the equation and now go use it. And then people are like, what? So we actually try to work with, well, where did it come from? Or why do you use it? Or when could you use it? Or, or how did it become what it is?
Exactly.
So, yeah. When you're looking at the how and why of teaching vocal, right? And it's funny because it's like, would you call it teaching vocal or teaching voice? Well, how would you How would you say that? Or is it
Yeah,
both?
it's a little synonymous. Yeah, I know sometimes
Okay.
vocal coach versus
Right.
teacher versus kind of different definitions kind of evolve over time.
Okay. Gotcha. Well,
Because
you're
not all my students are actually singers. They might just be speakers, or
right.
maybe they have a speech
Oh,
impediment or things like
right.
that. So it's still the
Yeah, yeah.
coordination of the same instrument.
Very good. Okay. So for all our speech and debate people out there, this course is for you as well, right? Because it's really great. That's interesting because I hadn't even thought about that. It's like I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
mostly for the people that are interested in singing, right? But really, a vocal coach is probably more where it is, or voice, because you
Right.
are looking at how do you your enunciation,
Well,
your
if you think of it
articulation, yeah,
this
all of
way,
that, right? Yeah,
if you think of it this way, learning to sing is, even if you don't have to have a goal of, I need to be in a band, I want to win a Grammy, I want to be in choir. The art of singing requires the coordination of the instrument you're using every day to communicate. So to help you with public speaking or get over anxieties of speaking in public and things like that, learning to sing is a wonderful tool that helps you with all of those aspects. And just to, you have to be vulnerable when you sing. So it kind of echoes into the personality and just the growth and maturity of an individual to be able to go through that process, which is pretty great. But I wanted to say that how and why. When did you start playing trumpet? Like, how old were you?
Oh, I was 11.
Okay, so what is
Yeah,
that, like fourth or fifth grade
I was in
kind of
fifth
thing?
grade. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
fifth grade. Yeah.
so what I don't know if this was the same for you, but what I recall is when you could pick a band instrument. If I think for us it was fourth grade, I wanted drums, but they were all taken, so I was left with trombone because that was the instrument that was just left over, right? So when they first showed me the trombone, they showed it to me, but I wasn't allowed to take it home. All they gave me was the mouthpiece to practice embouchure for like a month.
Right.
Right. And they said, okay, this is how you make a duck noise. And I don't remember. That was not an instrument I stuck with, but it was practicing a technique with your articulator muscles. And you learned, okay, this is what this is called the horn. This is called the valve. This is how you clean it. This is how you maintain it. This is how you, all these different, I think the first month was literally just understanding the instrument and practicing the embouchure before we even played a note. At the same time, you would join choir and they would hold up a piece of music and said, sing this. What's missing? The how, the why. What? Because we're already using this instrument and we completely skip over. So what ends up happening for a lot of those kids, I work with adults now, they're saying, man, I remember my teacher said, I didn't get the solo, so I must not have been good. So they just didn't pursue it. Or they didn't get the lead in the play, or their sister made fun of their voice because they didn't pursue the questions of, well, how come I didn't get that note? How come I didn't get that? So I think taking the time to understand how the instrument works and removing the mystery allows for literally anybody to grow and improve with their voice. And that's why I think it's so valuable to understand.
Yeah, it's amazing that you said that about the mouthpiece because, I started playing when I was 11 years old, right? And then I was actually in Europe, in Spain, and I met a guy, and he was at a part of a conservatory. My son's dancing there, and I was like, okay, he was a trumpet teacher, and I thought, you know what? I'll take why not? I'll take a couple, take a trumpet lesson once a week, right? And I'll go in. And so now by this time I've been playing for 40 plus years, right? So I go in and the guy's like, oh, we call you a professional level. I said, well, I haven't done this in a long time, but I mean, I play, but not every day. Right. So he said, no, I got it, man. No worries. He says, all right, well, we're going to get started, but you're starting at the professional level. And I said, oh, okay, awesome. So he goes, take your mouthpiece. And literally for the first 2 months of lessons, that's all we did was work with the mouthpiece. And it was great, even at that professional level, right? But it's great because when you said that, I was like, I remember, and had I done that when I first started when I was 11, it would have probably changed everything I was doing as a horn player all the way through. But I didn't discover a lot of that until 40 years later. So I was pretty amazing.
That's amazing. But how cool is that he took you back to the basics, back to just the most simple form.
Right.
And we should do that with this instrument too, because this is constantly evolving. Music we listen to, our voice aging and the larynx changing shape and size, as we go through puberty, constantly going back and questioning what we assume to be true allows for new opportunity to grow without question.
Yeah. It's so great. So, okay. So, the idea of oftentimes we try to think we got to do things by ourselves. We got to okay, I'm just going to do. So, it's like, oftentimes like people that are getting into sports and they're going to run or they're going to lift weights or whatever they do. And they just get in and they see the weight room and they just say, okay, well, I'm going to start pushing this up and down, see what happens. Right. Or I'll do push-ups and see what happens, or I'll run, see if I can run a mile and see what happens. Right. But, but having that coach, that person where you're really learning from someone else, you had Ted Neely in your corner, right? Which is super cool. But for you, it's like, I know that because you look at it like the vocal gym and you're approaching it as your coach. So what do you share with people about the importance of learning from others? Because it's huge to have that person in your corner to observe, to see what you're doing, to look and see, to provide things that you may not see for yourself when you're in the middle of doing something, but then someone else can see what you're doing there.
Absolutely. And you know what? Every person you work with, there is an opportunity to learn from. So I had Ted in my corner and he rooted me on and taught me some techniques, but I also had a ton of other teachers. Some I learned what not to do from, some I learned what to do from, but you have to knock on all of those doors because they're going to show you something that resonates. There's always something to learn from every person, from every teacher, because they may take something you already kind of know, but they'll phrase it in a way that clicks. And then it gives you something to apply. And that's huge. And it goes both ways. As a teacher, you became a better teacher because you taught somebody else.
Right.
And therefore you became a better student because you taught. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes. In fact, we do in our program. That's we want students. That's part of their assignment is go teach someone else what you're doing. Right.
We do the same thing.
Yeah, we did our test prep, and we do that specifically in our test prep programs because we know that if they go back and teach somebody what they're learning about in test prep, it's not just that problem that they're actually working out. It's they're really for themselves. They're distinguishing a process to understanding how to approach a problem. And so by teaching someone else, yeah, absolutely. So it's amazing.
I learned that on day one. My first lesson that I taught, I was like, I know the anatomy. I know how my voice works. I figured it out, right? And I went to teach my first lesson and everything fell apart because everything I knew about me and the anatomy didn't apply to this 12-year-old who wanted to learn a Britney Spears song. Like it just, none of it translated.
Right.
So being able to find a way to communicate in a way that resonated with her, that she could apply to what she wanted to learn with her voice was just, day one, I realized I knew just enough to know nothing about singing. Right. And that's been the adventure ever since, for sure.
Yeah. What a great place to be knowing that there's everything that you have and still being in that space of, wow, I'm just, it's like, I always say, it's like, I'm developing a muscle here. Right. So, and same, it's like, I learn from our students all the time. They'll say something during a class and, and I've been at this for over 30 years. Right. And somebody says something in the class and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's brilliant. Right. And all of a sudden for me, it ties together all these other things and it's like, it just takes it to a whole new level. So absolutely. So, okay. So you had the 12-year-old, right? What's the age group for your program? What's the right age of student to start?
The program definitely, that's a great question. The program definitely is geared for high schoolers, but works for middle school, particularly if you have a background in singing or your parents are pretty involved with the process. It's just because of the phrasing, the language that we use can be complex sometimes because you're going to learn what the zygomatic muscle is and what the thyroidarytenoid is. And those things matter not because you have to memorize them, because it gives a name to something that was mysterious, right? And we start to break those things down. So it does get complex, but it is applicable to any age in the sense that we teach how to safely learn how to use your instrument and how to develop it. And we always customize it. So based on what your skill is in that moment, we show you how to make it more difficult to challenge you to grow or to simplify it to adapt to where you're at today, because there's no right or wrong with that. There's always an opportunity to grow. So anybody can do it, but definitely geared towards that, probably 7th, 8th, and definitely 9th to 12th grade.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's
and we do
really
have
great.
that one assignment. I was going to say that one assignment in there is that the child has to teach the parent one of the exercises we show them. So we do the same thing that you do. I love that.
Yeah, it is. I think for me, it is it creates that whole self-directed learning at the same time, because you're out and sharing it and you're giving it back, but it does take you beyond that. The understanding, where you're moving from understanding to starting to develop proficiency to lead to mastery. And you have to be in that process to do that. Well, it's really awesome. Okay. You're going to have a contest at the FPEA in Orlando.
Yes.
People come to your booth. What are you going to be doing there?
We are going to see how long you can hold a note. And of course, we're going to have giveaways with that. So we're going to have my current record up there on display. And you're going to have a mic right there, and you're going to see if you can beat it, or at least whoever gets the longest is going to get a prize.
Oh man, I'm coming. I'm going to do the contest.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have a pitch monitor to let people know how they're doing?
So we're going to have a clock and a pitch. We're going to be a little forgiving. We'll give you like within maybe a whole step space. You just keep it as consistent as you can. Yeah.
That's great. Oh my gosh.
That'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
Well, I'm so excited you're going to be there in Orlando, and I'll be there. So we'll get to hang out and do that.
Can't wait.
Well. Yeah, Richard, tell people again, they want to come to the website and how to reach you. We'll put it in the show notes too for people.
Yeah, so Throga.com, and we have the course. You can find it right there, the Vocal Gym Homeschool, and we do private lessons and all sorts of things. But there's also a free assessment. If you're curious about the 7 dimensions, hit free assessment, answer a bunch of questions. You can see your voice in a graph. It's pretty cool.
Wow, that's a great place to start. See what's going on and get curious and interested, and off we go from there. So, well, Richard, thanks for making your time work. We got to come back and do this again. This was just too much fun.
Absolutely. Next time, you're going to bring your mouthpiece, and we're going to do some exercises.
Deal. All right, you got it, man. You got it. Yeah, it's good. I actually had a custom mouthpiece made from the teacher that I was working with. He gave it to me as a gift. He had it made for me, and I was just like, I still use it today now. So I don't get to play as much anymore as I'd like to. But but that's on my list of things that need to get back in where I'm getting back to that daily thing. Now I just kind of jump in and play. And I have there's actually got some friends in Orlando. Next time I'm in Orlando, I'll have to connect. There's a group of guys in Orlando. They have a band. And if I happen to be in town, I get to be their horn section. So they're just an old rock band.
Oh, that's awesome.
So they put me up with the Bruce Springsteen. So I'm kind of their Clarence Carter, so it's kind of cool, right? So,
this is what music does.
What was it? What's the saxophone player's name? Clarence somebody, but but anyway, that guy, so he's awesome, which is cool.
I just want to say this is what music does, because you're a mathematician and a teacher, but that music in your background still connects to other people and everything today. I just love music as a whole, in any instrument, but singing, because you already have the instrument, you will find a way to apply it for the rest of your life. It's just, it's amazing.
That's awesome. My friend, well, we're going to get back together and do this again. Super cool. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in to A+ Parents today, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.